Jason Harrelson, and today we are discussing trumpet and trumpet playing, and of course Harrelson Trumpets in this case, with James Knabe. And so welcome, James. It's nice to have you.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course. James is here at the Harrelson Trumpets shop in New Brighton, Minnesota, because we're having an open house this weekend, and James is traveling around the country, really just showing our horns, and he's our representative on the road. And he and his family are traveling around the country in an RV, and they're homeschooling, and it's really good to have him here. And I guess the first question is, how do you like living on the road?
Well, it definitely has its challenges, but we really do enjoy it. It's an interesting life because, well, working together as a family is not always easy to do. As you know, families can be difficult, right? We all have challenges together. But we've learned that in a small space you have to work together, and so it's been a good exercise in that way. And being on the road presents special challenges. We don't have a permanent home to go to, you could say. The actual vehicle we're traveling in is our home, so where we park is where we live.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and how often are you moving around?
Well, we're about every week to 2 weeks we'll go to a new location, and so in the last several months we covered about 8 or 9 states and saw quite a bit of area and people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, James knows this. I traveled around the country myself. My sister and I lived in a semi-truck with my parents, who were truck drivers. So that's a long period of my childhood was living on the road. And I imagine you have a lot of favorite parts of this, and of course the challenges. I remember the biggest challenge we had living on the road was, at the time, it was illegal for kids to live on the road with their parents as truck drivers. And that was because they claimed, when you were driving all the time, that somehow it could damage your kidneys and your liver. And I don't even know if that's true, but the funny story I have from traveling on the road so much is every time we saw a way station, we had to hide, because we'd have to stop at the way stations, and if they had any idea that there might be kids inside, they would search for us. And we had to hide in the little tiny cubbies and places. Wow. So my sister and I, when we saw a way station, we'd be like, "Oh, quick, hide!" And we really would. So how does the whole family like this? What are the big adventures that you've seen so far?
You know, they really enjoy it. It's been an adjustment for all of us, I think, in different ways. The children, I think, adjusted more quickly than my wife and myself. But of course, it's easier when you're a child to see things as just one great big adventure. And they didn't initially see all the rough sides of it, all the hard work and all the challenges, the things that are kind of behind the scenes. And so we've tried to include them in a lot of those so that they understand. And then we kind of catch some of their excitement too. And so it's something that they've been able to help us with, help us to kind of get along and just see it as an adventure and just take day by day and place to place, adventure to adventure. I mean, it's not all great and adventurous. There's a lot of hard work involved. There's a lot of things that can go wrong. There's a lot of things that have gone wrong. And so it's a learning adventure all the way around. And of course, there are risks involved. But we, just like anything else in life, there's going to be risk, right? And, you know, anything can happen. So we just really strive to enjoy each day and encourage and bless other people. And this is one way that we can do it. As we travel, we're able to share some really cool technology and ideas with people that many of them have never seen before.
Right.
Yeah.
So get into that side of things. Now that you're with Harrelson Trumpets, and we've been working together, obviously. We did the ITG conference together. On that side of things, can you just let everyone know how you discovered Harrelson Trumpets?
Well, that's a great question. I would say the first thing that brought me to you and to your instruments, I for many years have played trumpets for about 20 years, so that's quite a while, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I had a certain sound concept, a certain, I guess, efficiency, but maybe I didn't have that name in my mind that I was looking for. And so after years of playing that, I had an opportunity to look at something else because I wanted to get a new C trumpet. And so for many years I had been following kind of a little bit of what you were doing, but didn't really dig into it a lot because I was happy with what I had,
Right.
and it was working fine for me. And so I started to dig in a little bit more. And I realized not only are you the only one doing a lot of things out there, but you're the kind of guy that I would want to work with. You're really friendly, and you really care about each of your customers, your clients, and you also care about every part of the trumpet that you make. You're just not going to cut corners. You're going to do a great job and be very thorough. And so that really spoke to me because I've always played a high quality horn, I thought, but I wanted also that connection because I like people connections.
Right.
And so that was really important. And so we got to know each other, and then had the opportunity to do the build on the sea, and spent a weekend together visiting and time in the shop. I knew that I was doing the right thing. I knew that I was going the right direction, that I had made the right choice. So that's what led me to you.
Great.
To Trumpets.
Well, that's a good story. I appreciate the kind words, and I work very hard at what I do, and I always feel like I've only gone this far, and I really want to go there. But it's really nice to have that kind of feedback. And a lot of people hear like the great stories, and I imagine in this kind of thing, people would expect me only to ask the good things. But on the flip side of that, in the process of ordering your horn, you have a Summit Art trumpet, and it's one of the most complicated horns I've ever built. His horn has a lot of text in it, and it has a three-dimensional eagle, and it has a full 3D cross in the tuning slide, and it's a very intricate, a very detailed horn. But on the flip side of that, not everything is exactly like we would hope. How long did you have to wait for your horn?
It took about 8 to 9 months, and considering all the work that you had to do, you were actually able to do it pretty quickly, because I think what we were waiting for, I'm not sure if it was a valve set or there was something.
I think it was a valve set.
It might have been a valve set, and there was something that was key. So
because it was a C trumpet,
right.
And I only order valve sets twice a year.
Right, and so that was something that was kind of out of your control.
Right.
But of course, it's going to take longer, and people need to understand that. That's something, of course, I've already run into, and you've certainly run into, is we're kind of in a I want it now generation. I want it yesterday, and people need to understand the intricacy and the depth of work that goes into this. It's not like you have a sea of people out working on these trumpets.
Right.
You are building the instrument, head to tail, and really, we've got James who does finishing work, and there's some other things along the way, but really you're doing the large bulk of it, and a lot of it by hand, and so a lot of this is taking time, so people need to be patient with that. But so it'll take 8 to 9 months, but really for something like that, that's amazing.
Great. Well, I'm glad that timeline worked for you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times you try to get to a 3 or 4, 5 month, and there's some times where it's up more and sometimes where it's down.
Right. Well, that's very true. I mean, there are rumors that people wait 2 years for a horn. Well, that rumor will get out, and people will say, "Oh, that's horrible! You had to wait 2 years." The truth is, there have been some orders, and there are some today that are pushing 2 years, and that's only because people give me so many challenging things to do that sometimes it's beyond what I can do. So I try to let people know from the beginning, all right, we can, try to work on this concept and this idea and see if I can make it happen. But the truth is, since I've never done it before, there's no guarantee of how long it will take to get me there, or for me to get that finished. But yeah, that's the reality of custom manufacturing, because a lot of what I make is the first and only time it'll ever be made. Like the instance, with your horn, I had never done any of that before, so.
Well, there's also the unknown factor. You might have a breakdown of a machine, or a tool or something that you have to go and order.
And that's the nature of manufacturing. Machines, like we have CNC equipment, and our CNC lathe is down right now, and it has 7 servo amplifier drives in it, and that's 7 parts that are very expensive and can break, and one of them broke, so we have to replace that. So that kind of thing. Every year, we probably have a couple machine, breakdowns that take time too. So, well, back to trumpets. We're going to be building you a B flat trumpet here in the near future. And from what you know of everything that we offer, I guess, what are you looking for in your B flat?
Well, that's a great question. I think I do have, since I've got the Summit C, I'm very taken by the Summit technology and what it does for the sound and the efficiency. So I would say, we would start with the bass Summit B flat trumpet, and then, in terms of the lead pipe, I tend to play with a lot of air. One of my teachers, Charlie Schluter, plays with an extremely large amount of air, and it seems to be, it works really well for him, and it seemed to be something that I picked up and I like to do. So in that way, maybe like a number 2 lead pipe or something like that. There's another that's even more open, I think.
And you have the number 2 on your C
I
string?
do have the number 2 on the C.
Right.
So that might
I
be.
play on the number 2 on the Summit Midnight.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and then the bells. Now, of course, you have more choices on bells now.
Right. We have 4 new choices.
Right, exactly. So it's getting even more challenging. But I think there was was it the 3RX? And then there's maybe an 11RX?
Yes, we have the new ones are the 1X. All right, the X bells are extra wide diameter. So they used to be 5 inches in diameter in the standard size of our bells. The number 7 was always 5 3/8 to 5.5 inches. And it really comes down to when you turn a bell, it's not always easy to get it to the diameter you want because it has to fit on the mandrel. And we're pushing it right to the edge of the mandrel when these are made. So now we have the 1X, which is a number 1 bell, but it gets larger at the end. It's 5.3 inches. And the 3RX, which means it's a red brass, again 5.3, and then the 10 and 11 are both now available in the X model.
I think I tend to, I'm a fairly dark player in terms of my natural setup and sound, and the kind of work that I traditionally do with more of the classical freelance. A lot of that requires playing with a lot of strings or voice. And so you need to have a lot more ability to color your sound. And so the darker tends to work better if you want to kind of speak in generalities.
Right.
So that would be kind of the direction I would go, and I think the red brass could do that.
Right.
Right. So that's kind of the direction I'm going in terms of the bell. And then, in terms of the rest of it, there's so many options, but I think we'll probably keep it pretty simple. But there's Jason and I spent some time doing the CNC machine where we were milling out some different finished parts for the Summit 1.
Right.
And so that's just one example of some of the different kinds of options that you can have. It's fantastic, all these different options for the finger rings and for the bracing. It definitely can give a distinct look.
Right. So, the fine details, we can, of course, get that down. So you're thinking probably a 2 lead pipe and maybe a 3RX bell.
Something in that nature.
Somewhere in that range. Nice.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like it'd be a nice setup for what you're looking for.
I think so.
And then on the mouthpiece side, I know we've talked a little bit about the 5 mm, and we'll get closer to that soon. I guess more to steer it more towards a personal conversation about you as a trumpet player. If you could just, play any kind of music, if it was your favorite gig or your favorite opportunity to play music, what would it be? And in the past, in your experiences, what have you done that was, like, wow, this is one of the greatest times I've ever had?
Yeah, that's difficult, especially when you freelance and do so many different things. I did have the opportunity quite a few years ago. I spent a whole summer in Italy and doing opera. So it was a paid gig doing opera in Rome, and I was the principal trumpet for that. And I was actually co-principal with an Italian player. And it was a challenge because the conductor did not speak any English. It was all Italian, and so it was a little challenging because I tried to get a little help from some of the other brass players, and some of the brass players were very helpful. The trombone players they were just joking around the whole time. They wouldn't help, but but it was really fun, and I love opera music because it's so the depth is it's so deep with so many different levels of drama and voice and orchestra. And
of course, when you have to depict so many characters, because the trumpet a lot of times will be playing the main themes for different characters, and it can be so lyrical, and at the same time you can instantly jump to a different type of music, like from a march to a fanfare to you know, almost like a ballad or,
Yeah.
you know, an aria right away, even if it's not an aria.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think the other kinds of music I really enjoy would be chamber playing, and I've done a lot of trumpet soprano type music where we actually had a group that my wife was in with me. She was the pianist, keyboardist, and then we also did together with the cellist and a soprano. And so we did a lot of things together out of the Baroque repertoire as well as some of the more modern
Nice.
stuff. So that's a lot of fun. I like doing dynamics where you can be, you know, part of that whole puzzle. I love doing solo work as well, but I don't really, you know, I don't feel like that's my whole, you know, musical statement.
Sure.
More of a group chamber thing.
Sure. So you like the intimate passing around the parts and,
Yeah.
and melody and
Yeah.
playing.
Because of course this is a great opportunity for improvisation.
Mhm.
And a lot of people, of course, they confuse improvisation. They think that it belongs to only one genre. Of course, it shows up mostly in jazz, but they need to look also at the history of music, and they need to see that in the Baroque period, that was very common.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know, I tell people that all the time. If you're to transcribe a great bebop line today, a lot of times you could go straight back to J.S. Bach and see
Mm-hmm.
a lot of the same things. You're basically taking, now in pure Baroque music, a motif and then you're just developing it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what a lot of bebop players do. But to a greater extent, you know, between all the different melodic things that can happen and rhythmic and harmonic things that happen in a small group or even in like an opera, it's really cool how, you're right, you can play it in any character you want.
Yeah.
Because no matter what you have, you can create character within that.
Well, it's like the guys out in LA, you know, when they do the studio work, it's very similar, where you're changing styles all the time, and you have the opportunity to be doing a march, and then next you've got like this big melodic line, and then you've got like a jazzy thing, and you know, that's a whole other thing, but that's also, it's very challenging, but it's a lot of fun.
Right. Well, I agree. I think that does happen in the studio a lot. If you listen to animations or movies that are like Disney movies,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, for the last 50, 60 years, really the music is just as much a part of the story as the actual movie and the animation.
Yeah.
And without that, it'd be completely different. But I think you could definitely play a line and play a completely different character and pass that around as you do.
Yeah, it's pretty fun.
Yeah, very cool. Well, thinking of other questions, was there like a pivotal time in your life, like maybe when you're earlier in your career or when you were just starting out, where you said, yes, this is the moment when I've decided I want to be a musician for a living?
Yeah, there have been several of those. One of them that's probably maybe more humorous, and a lot of trumpet players will understand this. We all go through a period, I think, where the ego kind of takes over, and we think that we're, you know, the living end. The trumpet players tend to kind of fall into that at some point, because we're placed in such a position so many times where we're the leader of the band, where we're the lead player in the jazz band, whatever, you know, we're kind of in that position, and so the ego kind of tries to match up with that.
Right.
And that was me late in high school. And I was blessed to go to Interlochen later on in high school, and that is where I got straightened out. And so a lot of the players there that were there with me, many of them we've all gone on to be professionals, and at that point though, many of them were so much better than me that it just made me realize that I really had a lot to learn. And so that was pivotal for me, because a lot of people, I think a lot of the younger generation, as I have the ability to teach now as well as you do some teaching as well, and we see some of these younger players who think, well, you know, I don't really have to work that hard, or it's not really going to be that difficult. And they don't really realize the depth of the players that are already out there in the world, and how difficult it really is to be a successful musician.
Right.
That's a challenge. I mean, it is, and a serious challenge now.
Well, yeah, it is interesting you bring that up, because I go to the ITG conference every year, and you see a lot of great up-and-coming players. And, you know, people push their egos as far as they want here and there. And I guess what I've always been surprised with over the years, I don't know why it surprises me anymore, is that so often it's the humble person who is on the fringe of the conversation or whatever's going on and listening and contributing just a little bit that eventually pulls out a horn and just blows you away. And they do it when they think no one's watching, because they're so humble, and yet they've reached a level of accomplishment that they know better than to play those games, and to think that they're the best. I think, you know, some of the wisest people on the entire planet are the ones that realize that no matter how good you get at something, there are people that are going to be better. No matter how much you know, there will always be people that know more. There's always more to learn. There's always further to go, and that's just the nature of life. You know, it's a journey in knowledge and experience. And
I'm very glad that I learned that lesson early, and of course I continue to learn that lesson. But it's a great lesson to learn, and unfortunately a lot of people don't get that.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think eventually somebody puts you in your place.
Yeah.
I don't know that I ever had a big ego, because when I was younger, I just sucked. So I was so bad. But that's just how it goes.
Well, when I started the trumpet, I had no concept of rhythm. I had no rhythmic understanding. It was so bad that my mom, who really has no musical training at all, had to physically help me learn how to tap my foot. I mean, it was that bad. And so I'm thankful for all the shortcomings that I have had and had to go through.
Right.
Of course, that makes us better teachers, but it also makes us better learners.
Sure.
Right?
Of course, yeah.
And you know, if you really desire to learn, you're going to do well.
Right.
So I mean, that would be what I would say to a younger player. You know, if you really want to desire to do well, if you really want to be a top player, or if you really want to be a working musician, you know, you need to be a learner, and you need to be a lifelong learner. If you think you've got it all together, you are not going to be a top flight performer. That's just how it is.
Well, you answered my next question, which was, did you have anything that you'd like to share with young players or other players that are watching this?
I think that's the first one, and the other one is to make sure that you are doing it for the right reasons. So like, for instance, years ago when we would go to college, it was very common, and I imagine it still is today, that people would go and they would do like a music major in performance, but then they would also get their education degree as a fallback, which is ridiculous, because someone who teaches really needs to want to teach and value what they're doing. And teaching is one of the greatest things that I've ever been able to do. You probably feel the same way, because if you can pass something on to someone else, you've given them a gift. But if you're just teaching them to get a paycheck or whatever, forget it. Don't do it.
I would totally agree with that. I'd add to that, a lot of the things that I know about physics and about aperture control, when I teach embouchure and range and endurance and tone and all of that, I always talk about aperture control, because it comes down to, like, for me, sometimes it comes down to the physics side of it. But then it also comes down to how that works with a human being. And years ago, I used to teach 80 lessons a week, all brass lessons. I did some other lessons once in a while, like piano and violin and things like that, because I played those too. But it's mostly brass instrument lessons and primarily trumpet. And I had this theory that I could teach young kids who just started in the first 2 weeks, I could teach them to play a C scale 2 octaves. And you know, I wasn't sure I could do this, but in the course of about a year, I learned how to do it. And usually I could get almost every student to be able to play a full C scale 2 octaves, if they were engaged. But it's interesting you say that. You know, you have to want to teach to be a teacher. And good teachers, of course, will, you know, inspire students to really want to learn. And they really have to go together.
Yeah, I mean, and you need to know how to be a communicator. You need to know how to connect with people on different levels, because everyone's in a different place.
Right.
You know, I mean, I teach students of every level, every age, including adults and other players who play in the area. And you know, we all need different levels of attention, and we all need different levels of connection. So some people are going to respond very well, like you said, teaching that 2 octave C scale. Some people are just going to go home and apply that right away. Some people are just not going to understand how to apply it, even if they want to. And so we need to be able to explain things in different ways. And so for people to think that it's just something that they can fall back on is crazy.
Yeah, well, you do see that quite often. And I know we've probably run into teachers who maybe had to teach us something that had that as well. They just really weren't into it. Only because I started on this topic, well, I finished the whole people say, well, why would you teach like a 4th grader 2-octave C scale? But my theory was, because I just want to clarify that, because people are like, you just go around messing people up. I didn't mess up any players by doing this. My theory was that because young people had never touched an instrument before, if I got to them the first lesson, then I would teach them about the mechanics of how it works. So I'd talk to them about airflow and airspeed and aperture control. And we would usually start out in the first lesson playing up to high C, because the kids didn't know it was a high note, and I never told them.
Right.
And I didn't, and they weren't using lots of pressure, and they didn't have the problems we would expect they would have, because we approached it in a different way. And I think that's the power of being a creative teacher and approaching a problem, or maybe approaching something as if it isn't a problem. I approach it as if it's just natural to be able to play those notes.
That's right.
And since kids, they were usually kids, have smaller mouths, it should be easier for them to play that because they have a smaller oral cavity. So, well, the last question I have for you really is kind of open-ended, but I've got a horn here, just so we have a prop if we need it. But is there anything about playing the trumpet, any trumpet, it doesn't matter what brand or who made it or when it was made, but is there anything mechanics-wise or just the physical, like holding it, or anything about the trumpet that you would like to share with other people that you think is maybe a kernel of wisdom that would help others in terms of their, or several things if you have more than one?
Sure, yeah. Well, let me think about that. If I had a piccolo trumpet, that would be something, and we could just pretend here, but of course, this is a common problem that we see with players, is they don't understand the nature of certain parts of the trumpet. And you can start with what we call like the pinky ring or whatever. Of course, originally probably designed so you could do page turns. And some people just like to have a place to put their pinky. And with this one, this is actually a terrific design because I can do it exactly like I normally do, is I like to just set it up on top and let it rest there. But of course, what this does is a lot of people tend to utilize it in such a way that they get poor body use and they start forcing things and damaging themselves.
Right.
And that of course applies especially to mouthpieces. A lot of people don't understand why a mouthpiece is shallow or why it's deep. They don't understand. They just say, well, everybody plays a 14A 4A to get double high Cs. Right. And there's nothing wrong with the 14A 4A for certain people.
Sure.
And in certain circumstances, it's just that efficiency-wise, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And so I think, my only encouragement is that people start thinking about the concept of playing in an efficient manner, not just with the actual equipment, but with the whole body use. And so, you see a lot of players who they'll play just like down here, or they'll play in some sort of a strange manner. And you don't understand why are they doing that?
Right.
But it's how they learn, right? And so I just encourage people to take a look, and sometimes just videotaping yourself would be a good thing. I'm sure you've done that before.
Oh, yeah.
And audio taping is good as well. Some people will look in the mirror, but you don't want to scrutinize things too much, because then you'll freeze. Too much analysis leads to paralysis, I guess.
Of course, yeah.
But occasionally do some videos and just watch yourself, but make sure when you do it that you're doing it with a non-critical eye. And like Ben Zander, who conducts the Boston Philharmonic, he actually teaches a class called Interpretation at New England Conservatory. And when I was there studying, I took his class actually a couple of times. He's a very fascinating person. And one of the things that he said, which made a lot of sense, was if you make what you think is a mistake, or something doesn't go quite right, what's your reaction to that going to be? And so we had different ideas, and of course a lot of people would be like, that was terrible, or whatever, which is what we do a lot of times. But instead he said, well, why don't we look at it a little differently, and why don't we say how fascinating or how interesting that was. And what you're doing is you're basically not being critical in a critical way. You're being critical in a positive way. You're saying, okay, well, that was different. Right. And then let's because really face it, when we play music, if it's not different, every time, it's not music.
Right.
If you're playing a lead sheet in a combo, you know, and you play it the same way every time, you're not playing jazz. You know, I mean, Louis Armstrong can tell you that, right? You can say, that's not jazz.
Of course, he's interesting because he would memorize his solos, write them out, and then he'd go play them. But if you listen to the recordings, they're all variations of the same solo.
Right.
They weren't the same solo.
Exactly, and that's true for every genre. You know, if you talk to a really good classical player, say if you talk to one of the trumpet players in the Chicago Symphony, for instance, and they're going to tell you every time they play it differently. Now, they have to play in tighter parameters.
Right.
Okay, so there's a certain expectation that they get from the conductor, but they're going to play it differently. Not only for the fact of musicality, but also to keep themselves sane.
Of course.
Right? So, you know, those are a few different ideas that I have in regards to the trumpet and what people can do differently.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for
Sure.
being here today, and it's good to have you. And I know you and I will probably do more of these because we'll see each other around the country. So.
That's right. Yeah, and hopefully interviewing and meeting other trumpet players. And
Exactly. And you could probably host some of these as well.
sure.
So James and I will, be back on the show a few more times for sure as time progresses. And of course, you want to catch James as he travels the country. And where are you going to be the next few months?
So in the next few months, we're going to be going to do a brief stint through Iowa. Then we're going to go through Chicago and Southern Illinois, Indiana and Ohio, and then we're looking at several other areas in the next few months, including Atlanta, Louisville, Tennessee. So we'd be covering a lot of cities in Tennessee, Chattanooga, and of course Nashville.
Nice.
And then we'll be working our way back up the Midwest, and then we're looking at next year covering Texas as well as out near to California, and then all the way back to Florida, all the way up the East Coast.
Wow.
So we should be covering a lot of the country.
Oh, very nice.
So I do hope that a lot of people will come out and see what we have. We're going to have a lot of horns and mouthpieces at some point here, and other good things for them to try, and they can hear some great information about the Harrelson technology and the story, and meet some other players in the area.
Yeah.
And of course, you're going to be coming out to some of those too.
Yes, definitely. I'll offer master classes, on, I guess, whatever topic people want to hear.
Yeah.
And, I'll catch up with you on several of those.
Terrific.
And if you want to learn more about this, then of course, you can go to the Harrelson Trumpets Facebook page. You can also go to harrelsontrumpets.com. And James has a blog on there. He really talks about all the places that he's traveling and the players that he meets, and he puts a lot of great photos and videos up. And of course, my blog is on there as well. And we hope to see you in a city nearby sometime soon. So thanks again, James.
Thank you.
Okay.